Welcome to the show here. So I'm here with Andrew Choubeta. Andrew Choubeta is a paralegal in Hamilton, Ontario with Caveat LLP. So Andrew, how about you tell us a little bit about yourself, your business, and how you help investors and landlords?
Yeah, I am a paralegal. I do a lot of landlord and tenant board matters. I'm also an investor as well. So I do have some rentals here inside Hamilton, the GTA area, and then back home as well. Mostly what we deal with is a lot of investor focused litigation and legal issues. So a lot more the day-to-day things, not the large things. So, not legal matters over 1 million, 100,000, that kind of thing. It's mostly small claims, so under 35,000. And the practical day-to-day issues that the investors will deal with. So like contractors disappearing, contractors not being able to get paid, invoices, people being, dealing issues with the city and permits and then, stop work orders, that type of thing. But the bread and butter, the most of what people know our office, it's going to be, non-payment of rent, and then all the things that come with delinquent tenants. So, drugs, guns, and everything else in between. So usually our office takes the worst of the matters traditionally, like the really bad stuff.
Okay.
That's typically what we deal with. But we do the simple things every once in a while as well. So it's not just me. Like I love to take credit for everything, but it's not. It's like I have a team to the
Yeah.
side of me and behind me as well. So we have our assistants Abigail and Lily, and then my partners Angela Smith and Glenn Gosling as well. So we all work as a team with every matter. As to case in point, I'm going out to kindergarten today for an eviction, and it's all three of us actually because the OPP are going to be there. So it's a
Wow.
lot of, yeah. So it's a lot of legwork. This type of industry, like what we do.
Hmm.
To be honest with you, I didn't think when I was doing my the legal training that it would be so physical. Like it would be more practical than anything.
Right. Yeah, you used to be
Yeah,
there.
yeah, because people
Yeah.
people have this idea that it's, don't get me wrong, it's a lot of paperwork. It's copious amount. You see my desk is just filled with it, but it's a lot of practical issues too, dealing with tenants and going to properties and taking photos and damage and that kind of stuff. Because I'm not this, I'm not a larger gentleman, but there's a lot of people that we deal with that are in their 80s, their 70s, their 60s, and they've bought these properties, and people get in and they move into these properties and they take advantage of people, right? And then vice versa as well. It doesn't. We don't take tenant matters like at all really, but it doesn't happen often. But there's some landlords out there that are just not that great as well. So it's not something we deal with. I usually have a colleague that'll take care of it. But there's a lot of that stuff going around these days, and the landlord tenant board is really strewn in one direction, right, with the tenant side. So you're seeing, I have a case in Hamilton now that tenant has been holding back on the property to vacate, and the property's been sold for 8 months, right? And as of right now, the seller is currently looking at bankruptcy, and the buyer sold their property and is living in a trailer outside the property that they
Wow, that's a
purchased.
that's a ton to unpack. So obviously you deal with a lot of other things, relationships, a lot of hands-on. You're
Yeah,
there, you're doing evictions, you're helping with those things. I remember with one of our clients, you helped file an actual N11, which we'll talk about that as well, which allows end of tenancy and cash for keys and stuff. What are the biggest things that, I mean, kind of a two-part question, that sellers, landlords need to consider when they're selling their investment property with tenants? The first things they should do, maybe a kind of I don't say cheat guide, but something that makes it easier for them to kind of figure out how to go through that process. And what are the biggest challenges you're finding right now in this with the landlord tenant board as well as with tenants in general?
yeah. The biggest stress these days, like I'm speaking from a business owner's perspective and a paralegal's perspective, those two together. And the biggest, like if you're just looking at my practice right now, our biggest issue is that setting expectations with the client and understanding that, when you're dealing with this problem, it's a marathon, not a sprint. And I tell every client, like, I'll do the best I possibly can to alleviate the situation. It's mostly like stress relief that we're brought on, because at the technical side of things, the board is very difficult to deal with, even for non-payment of rent matters, right? It's very technical, and it's, frankly speaking, if you've never gone to the landlord tenant board before, I recommend you use a paralegal or a lawyer before you decide to do anything. But on a practice basis, it's getting harder and harder, sort of explaining the situation to people,
Mm-hmm.
because if you think about it this way, it's like it makes no sense that someone could sit in a property for 9 months, and that's a big outlier these days.
So it starts with obviously like getting the right person in there,
Oh yeah.
having front lobby, making sure they get that right person reporting the payments and their credit, and make sure that they're not a professional tenant. There are some resources that they can look at to make sure that that tenant is not a professional tenant. They're actually, there's no court cases for that tenant. There are certain resources as well, right? For that
Yes.
landlord.
So you have two choices. You can pay for screening or you can pay me. And the last time I checked, it was cheaper to screen your tenant, right? Legal fees are a lot more. Screening a tenant doesn't cost you as much. So like you have multiple steps here to sort of protect yourself. And this should apply to every tenancy because I don't care if you're a new investor, old investor, whatever it is, you wouldn't, if you had a $300,000 car or a $500,000 car, you wouldn't hand the keys to someone you didn't know. But
Yeah.
effectively, that's what you're doing with the property. And I hear every objection, cost
No,
effectiveness, all this. It's all dumb.
no,
It does not make
no.
sense because you're handing those keys out to that person. And it's like a
Mm.
good tenant is better than the foundation of that property. A good tenant can take care of the maintenance, can do all that. They won't
Yep.
bother you, pays rent on time. It's a pleasure to deal with. Like all these things that are, like make your life a lot better and makes the whole point of the investment work. You don't screen, then you're
That's,
running into an issue where it's just abysmal.
yeah.
So I actually tried to, well, I am in the process of setting up a company with our office to do tenant screening. It's not finished as of yet. We haven't started, but basically Rent Panda exists,
And a rent
eAgree
panda,
exists.
right? Yeah.
Yeah, front lobby, all these other. The big thing that people are doing these days is so you have echelons of how much you can screen. The first basis you can start with is the one that I never recommend, which is you do it yourself,
No,
right?
I
You
wouldn't
see,
recommend either.
yeah, like it's just that's no. If you're even if you're an experienced investor, no. From the second part, you start to get to realtors, right? And there's a lot of good realtors out there that do leasing, and you do have a higher probability of not dealing with a professional tenant because you're dealing through a realtor, right? So the realtor goes through FinTrack forms. Realtor does driver's
Okay.
license.
Yep.
It's a lot of checks and balances, brokerage, deposits, etc. There's a lot more administration around the actual leasing of the property. So there's that gap, right? And realtors have a very good and specific purpose, right? Realtors, as a happenstance, also screen the tenants. However, mainly speaking, they are looking for a quality tenant, not to realistically screen the tenant. Right? They do it in some capacity, but not in an expansive capacity because the nature is they can't do it. They don't have the licensing to do it. Right? They don't have the resources to do it. But that is a proper step, and a lot of people will end at that step because it's an expensive step in their mind. I don't believe it is.
No.
Standard rate is 1 month's worth of rent plus
Yeah.
tax.
Shortcuts become your long cuts. Yeah, I agree. No.
Yeah, right. So
Yeah.
again, that's a very standard step, right? The next step above that, that is going to be your standard screening process, your rent panda, your front lobby, that type of thing. So they'll look at employment. They'll contact the previous reference, right? And what you should be doing is not just contacting the last landlord because he'll only say good things. You want to contact the landlord before that.
Yeah.
That's the individual you want to talk
Okay.
to, right? So they'll do screen for that. They'll screen for the employment, right? They'll take employment documents, etc. This used to be where the cookie sort of crumbled, and that would be it. Like it wouldn't be set to a position where you would be inside any issue because that was enough. Now it's not, right? Because every tenant these days, well, actually every tenant, broad stroke, but a lot more tenants are being very savvy when it comes to getting past those steps. So you're getting fake employment documents,
Big
right?
credit reports, right?
Great
As
credit
well.
reports.
Yeah.
Those are now rampant. They're everywhere.
Wow.
Right before it was like there was only a few people using it. Everyone, even the good tenants, are using them now, right? Because they just want to be competitive. So what do? You lie and you put a better credit report rating. So the next step after that, people are making fake employment documents, right? They'll log a fake number on the employment signature or authorization page, and you call that number that's on the actual document, it goes to a burner number, or there's these apps that you can get and just get a rolled number that
Wow.
you pay like $10 or $15 for, or prepaid numbers, and it'll go to a friend. It'll go to a neighbor, someone they
Oh
know,
my goodness. Wow. That's
right?
like crafty to the next level. Wow.
That's the next level, like, and that's where it starts. The fraud starts. And I have to say, that is not a shocking thing. That is daily. That used to be shocking. It's not anymore. It happens a lot. So that's where things are, and you can see now, to a realtor doing these checks, like a lot of them don't go further after this.
Yeah, no,
A
agreed.
lot of them get caught out at this stage, right? Because they're not assuming that their own client is going to lie to them, right? Because why, there's a little bit of trust there. So they're not assuming this is the case, but a lot of these realtors get lied to, and these documents are
Mhm.
forged. Now the professional tenants are the ones that are able to escape and pull the wool over our eyes, law firms. They're very, very good. They're very savvy, and they're very, very diligent and very competent people, even though they may not seem like they are. So a professional tenant, we had one that I've dealt with. This person made a fake employment document, but was smart enough to not utilize a large company. It wasn't with it wasn't with Air Emirates. It wasn't with Coca-Cola or something like that. It was an engineering company based out of Ottawa, and they were claiming that they worked remotely as an engineer. He had a full LinkedIn profile. He had employment documents. He had a credit report rating, etc., etc. The credit report rating was not fake. Credit report rating was real, and he was fair. It wasn't bad. Now, the actual company, the engineering company, you would look up the engineering company, and there was individuals working there, contact us page, photos, etc. There was a listed address, like it was a full engineering website, right? It looked real. And you call the number, someone would answer, and it was a call service. So like they would answer in the sense of it being the company. So you call PKR Solutions or IFF
Right.
Investments, whatever. But this tenant had paid a virtual assistant to do the answering of the calls, had made the fake website, had made the fake LinkedIn, and completely duped everybody. The way that they were caught was, and they even incorporated a company to do this, right? So the
Mhm.
sophistication level is very high. The company doesn't exist. It's not a real company. The only reason they were caught was because of the website. The website domain was registered in 2022.
So what can
And
a landlord do then if they need to get past that next step? Is it property management for screening? Is it what's that next step for them to make sure they're screening right? Because we'll talk about after that, but what's that next step for them then?
you have to dig deep. There's only a few places that can get past that. To be frank with you, it's property management, yes, but it's an intern between law firms and property management. So a
Okay.
law firm can look up a lot more things than most people think,
Right.
right? Like, and we use a lot of private investigators for our own work when we're looking for a client to serve a small claims action, right? There's also something called the small claims court intranet. So if you're a tenant in Hamilton, the John Sapinka courthouse is here inside Hamilton. You can run a search through the courthouse intranet computer and see if there's any litigation with that tenant. Anything will come
Okay.
up, right?
Interesting.
Garnishments, etc. There's ECSA online where
Mm.
you can do a credit report search, garnishment, bankruptcy, all these things. All of it will come up if you run the search, corporate searches,
So they're
etc.
more likely to do something again. So that's a pattern, right? I guess it's a pattern of them, small claims, professional tenant, that kind of thing, right?
If you're looking at a professional tenant, someone's looking for them,
Okay.
right? Like you don't get
Understood.
that sophisticated on your first try.
Right.
This is someone that's done it before,
Right.
and the appropriate. But this is the thing: people get squirmy for doing these searches because they cost money, right? A good screen on a tenant will cost you, 1 month's worth of rent for the realtor. If you're at $2,000, now you're paying $2,000 to the realtor and then $500 for the law firm to do the screening of the tenant. It can be a lot, and I understand that, but you're
Mhm.
looking at tenancies at
No, it's
12 months, 20 months, etc.
yeah. With
Yeah.
with a non-pay, and you'll probably say to this like 9 months for a non-pay plus extra. time
Yeah.
to get to court and maybe not even win the battle or whatever. That's nothing compared to it. I think it's definitely important. So you're saying that a legal component as well as property management or realtor layers are going to help with the screening to be even more rigorous to make sure that that first level is in place, right? So
Yeah.
screening with a company like, so I think that makes sense. It seems like you're solving a problem in the marketplace. So let's say someone comes in, and I wanted to bring you on today to kind of figure out from start to finish, a landlord, because a lot of people learn these mistakes. We've had investment properties, other people, and you learn different levels of mistakes. And I feel like we almost need an expertise to come on and say, when you start, you screen your tenant, here are the mistakes you should avoid.
Mhm.
Also, now when you have the tenant, what are things you should have in place, you should look for? What are the different forms you should know? Because I feel like there's not enough education and knowledge on it. So if you could share
Mhm.
with me a little bit about that, right? When you have the tenant in place, what should you look for in your lease agreement? What forms should you understand? What should you look for when you're selling a property when it comes to having a tenant as well? I know it's a lot, but you can
No,
go.
no, no. It's a very valid thing. So you're it's okay. So you're mainly looking at what the total damage will be when I answer that question. It's you know you're looking at, if you're an investor and you're looking at 12 months of not like it okay. The
Mm-hmm.
landlord tenant board says 6 to 8 months. That's just for the hearing date, right? Let's say you try to be nice to the tenant and you gave them some forgiveness for the first month was non-payment. I'm saying you get paid half. Then you waited for the next month. You called them. They said, "Yeah, I'm gonna pay you." So you waited another month. So now you're at 3 months. Then you start doing something about the N4 for non-payment. You're at 3 months of non-payment, just like that. Add that to 8 months. So 8, 9, 10, 11. You're 11 months now. That's just for the hearing. Then it takes at minimum 2 to 3 weeks to get your order, at minimum. And people don't understand it can take a long time to get your order. 4 months sometimes. I've seen horror stories at 7. So now you're at 4 to 5 months to get your order. Then you got to get the sheriff. And if it's in Toronto, it's going to take 6 weeks. So you can realistically be looking at 17 months, 19 months, 20 months. You can be looking at that very seriously. I have a hearing next week. The original application was 2019.
Selling your home during tough times, whether you're downsizing, divorce, or debt, we understand the unique challenges you're facing. Introducing our specialized real estate solution to help you navigate these difficult times with ease. Selling a home can be overwhelming, and yet our experienced team will guide you through the process, providing personalized strategies to maximize your home's value. Whether you're downsizing, going through a divorce, facing debt, will help you sell your home and start anew. Don't let these challenges define your selling experience. Let us turn them into opportunities. Visit our website at affluenceregroup.com to learn more. Wow.
And the last hearing we had on this particular matter, because it was 2 hearings. The last hearing we had on this matter was adjourned, and it was adjourned in 2021. We are now in 2023. And it has yet to come up until now on Tuesday of next week. And it's a monster of a file, but it's been waiting. It's just been sitting there for multiple months. And meanwhile, there's other applications I've dealt with. They've just long since finished. Same application type. We filed it, served it, went to a hearing, completed it, done. And this one has just been sitting there. So the board is inconsistent when it comes to that. So
Okay.
the market really needs to change on what expectations are on what you're spending on early and preventative measures and
Mm,
doing that. It's gone are the days where you can just rent a property on your own.
no. Yeah.
If you,
No.
if you rent a property,
No.
Lord have mercy, like if
No.
I wouldn't sell a property on my own, right? I can, I've worked in law for years. I wouldn't do it, right? And I've worked in real estate for years. I wouldn't do it because I wouldn't pretend that I know what I'm talking about, right? But
Yeah.
this odd thing, if you get to 200 units, or like, and I deal with investors that have 100, 300, 400 units, right? And cost effectiveness comes down, but people need to understand, if you have 200 units, maybe you can stomach that cost. But someone who has 5 units, you are not the 200 unit investor looking at cost breakdown. You're not. You are 5 units. One tenant will sink you completely.
Yeah.
And the nature of it, with 5 units, you're going to be at the landlord and tenant board at least once in every 6 years or 5 years.
Yeah. Like
So
where can you see someone sustaining 20% of their like out of their business? No,
yeah,
yeah.
you can't do that. So if you want to look like, just let's talk pure capitalism basis. I look at my clients when I see what their Rolodex is and I look at their property count, I look at them and I say, you've got 10 units. I know for sure that client will be back at my doorstep with another matter at least once every 4 years. This is how law firms will price out clients. They know which ones are the big ones and which ones are not the big ones. So for every 10, you have at least one matter at least every 4 years. You get to 200, then you're looking at a lot more, right? So that's what you're typically looking at. Now, if you have 10 units at 12 to 13 months of non-payment of rent, let's say the average rent is what's in Hamilton is now 2,634.
Yeah. Yeah. Let's say, yeah, our area, yeah, 2,600, 2,700. That's about right.
Yeah, quick search average rent, Hamilton, Ontario, right? Hamilton, Ontario. As of 2023, they just increased it. So it's Zumper says it's 1,775
Yeah,
for
that's
one
wrong.
bedroom. For one bedroom, right? So let's just use that times 13 months, right, of non-payment of rent. That gives you $23,049 in non-payment of rent. Okay. Then your associated filing fee, 186, right? So now you're at 23,235. Now you have to add your legal costs, which is going to roughly be about a regular paralegal after taxes, going to be about 2,147. Okay, that puts you to 25 grand, just like that. Then your sheriff fee, because let's say the tenant doesn't leave. So now you're at $302 for the sheriff fee. So now you're at 2,568. Okay, you can't go to the property without changing the locks, and you're likely going to need a locksmith to do that. And you can't change the locks alone because some sheriffs won't let you because the landlord's there and it can be very dicey or violent with the tenant being there. So you're now at a locksmithing fee for, let's say, 2 doors, right? So you're looking about $250. So now you're almost at $26,000 because you decided to be nice to the tenant for 2 months.
No, I
If
know.
you had not been nice,
Yeah, I agree with you on that. So do you ever see situations where the sheriff, they didn't get, do they leave after the sheriff comes in and enforces them to leave, or does it ever get past that where just curious? I'm just curious if you've
yeah.
ever seen that.
So the big thing these days is tenants will declare bankruptcy. That's a big trend. Since the
Okay.
law is based upon late payment or non-payment, and then the actual eviction as well, if you wipe out the debt, you
They
can't
can't go
evict
after
them.
them.
So what
Oh,
they'll do is they'll
wow.
wait
What
to
a
the end.
loophole.
Yeah, so they'll wait to the end.
Wow.
Then that 25 grand that we just pushed through, and let's say it was adjourned twice, so it could be
It's
because these
gone.
people are very smart. It'll be about $30,000. It's gone. They owe you nothing
Oh,
now, right?
wow.
And then now you've gotten to the next part. Now you got to wait another $22,000, right? It's going to take 8 to 9 months just to get to the hearing, and you're looking at what, $60,000 with dealing with a professional tenant, 60 or 70. So
Yeah.
that's
So
how you
that's,
see like a lot of these issues, these landlords showing up to properties with baseball bats and shutting off the power and that kind of thing. It's like this is the story behind that. This is the reason why,
so there's
right?
almost like a outlash against this because the cost is really high. Investors that have multiple properties indoors is costing them way more. And the outlay of how much it's costing them over a lifetime of, like you said, 30 months or 28, 27,000. It's a lot of money actually, isn't it? For one professional tenant or a non-pay file.
Yeah, yeah,
Wow, it's
and
huge.
I have a client who's a developer. He has a property here in Hamilton, and it's the same one that I'm dealing with on Tuesday with the large file.
Mm-hmm.
His non-payment is at 68,000 in non-payment. That's what he's at right now in total loss and everything. And I don't know about you. I don't know any developer that can just like a smaller
No.
developer that can just eat $68,000. I just don't
Yeah,
know. Like,
no,
even a very
yeah.
wealthy individual, like that's a lot of
Well,
money.
especially after tax dollars too, right? It'd be like it's like 100,000 really because after tax 68,000 they owe extra.
Yeah,
So let's say someone does the right screening, they learn this lesson, right? They use the right service, they use maybe your service as well, legal, and you guys have been great for our clients. What do they do now when it comes to getting the lease? What do they look for when it comes to that lease? And then taking it a step further, what do they educate themselves on? What are the most important things they need to educate themselves on? So that way when they're ready to sell the property, they know everything that they need to know and they're ready to make that move and to do it the right way. Maybe it's understanding N11 or N12 and the rules behind looking what to look for in the APS when it comes to selling their property. but also when it comes to the tenant agreement, like, do they have to be can they be month to month? Can they be 1 year lease, 6 months? Like, what are things that landlord should do when they have a good tenant now in place that they should look for in that tenancy agreement too? Just anything you can share
Um,
would be great.
I don't think if you are a landlord, you should not be utilizing. Well, I don't believe you should be doing month to month at all. To be honest with you.
Okay.
Well, sorry, not sorry, year leases. Not. You should not be using year leases whatsoever.
Okay.
Month
So
to
there's an
month.
expectation because I remember at the landlord watch conference, it was like, well, you don't have to do the 1 year. People automatically do the 1 year. They did 2 year. I saw a client do 2 years. I said, what do you put two
Yeah, there's no point.
years. Like
Yeah, there's
that's
no
going to
point.
put you, because I know when you get an offer on a property, that landlord tenant board, that lease agreement is going to take precedence over anything in Schedule A of the agreement for the purchase, because like they get to stay because their lease agreement is longer than,
X amount
so
of dollars. Yeah,
yeah, wow.
and the two biggest things that are of issue are first one being you are hindering your ability to first increase rent with the N1, which is a legal rent
Mhm.
increase. You're hindering that first ability. And then the secondary thing that you're doing is you're gonna have issue when it comes to dealing with any sale. That's a big one. You can't evict the tenant whatsoever with a sale being there.
Yep.
And then addition to that, like you're playing a game with like the market value interest rate. Locking yourself into a year's worth of rent or 2 years worth of expected rent without an increase, that interest rate goes up, which is what happened with a lot of these people that with those
Mhm.
condos that put them in 1 year lease, the interest rate spikes and then your profit margin disappears. So you always play a game of the increase of rent at the interest rate and your base rent following it as well. So you want to keep your base rent a little bit above. So when you're looking at a property, whatever the market value is, you want to do at least $200 more. It'll be harder to rent, but that's what you're realistically looking for. And then you do your yearly increases one by one, and you get your additional 20, 30, $40 per year, and you're just pushing that gap a little bit further, a little bit further. It'll eventually catch you, but you want
Yep.
to push as far as you can get it, right?
Okay.
And then, because eventually what ends up happening is the rent becomes too low, the interest rate spikes above that, then you're in the negative. That's just the
Okay.
nature.
So you're creating a buffer that protects you from the inevitable catch up of the fact that the rent is not increasing fast enough. I
Yeah.
had a question actually from someone that said, I bought a 2001 property in Brampton. I added a legal apartment basement, right? Any is it subject to rent control or not? Because it's a new unit in an older property. I said, well, does it depend on the area? Like, what are your thoughts on that? Like, because that's interesting, right? Like
Oh yeah, rent
rent
control.
control.
So this is okay. If any of my colleagues are going to see this, they're going to be jumping up and down with like with the response as well. This is a controversial thing with a lot of paralegals and a lot of lawyers too.
Yeah.
The law is clear and unclear. The case law is unclear and the law is clear, right? So depending on who you talk to, you'll hear multiple different things. Okay. So the only reason why I say this particular thing is because I know how to do it and I've done it before. And I've done it in hearings and I have the precedent for it. So if my colleagues have a disagreement with it, then it's like I would refer to the case law and make the argument for it. But anything after 2018, I believe it's November,
Yep.
is considered a new unit. Now, this also applies to new units built and zoned with the municipality. And the previous usage of that specific space was a non-residential usage. Okay. So if you have a single family home, okay, you have a garage in the second family home, you have a granny suite in the garage or small living area. If you duplex that property and then you put a third unit within that granny suite, right, and you get it zoned, it's legal, etc., it passes code, it has to be legal, then your two units, the duplex within the property, that would be rent controlled, right? It would not be exempted because let's say the property was built before 2018. Let's say it was that. So that wouldn't be held in the exemption. But the granny suite, which is now legal, that is completely held outside the RTA, so it's not rent controlled. So it matters, like a new unit that's registered, you can make the argument that it is a new unit. And as a new unit, but the reason why it's controversial is because if you look at the law, it's very clear actually. It says anything built after 2018 is exempted. So the structure itself, if it's not built after 2018, people would have a really rudimentary sort of thought of it. I shouldn't say rudimentary, but more of a more practical thought on it, that it should just be rent controlled, right? Because it's not built after 2018. The structure was there physically. It's been there since 1965. How could it be unrent controlled, right? So there's a lot of people that don't see eye to eye on that subject. A lot of paralegals, a lot of them, and a lot of them can make some very good arguments on either end, right? So it depends on the adjudicator. That's the way I practice with it, and I've been successful at it. Knock on wood, kind of thing. That I haven't been unsuccessful, but when I see a new legally zoned unit that's built after 2018, typically speaking, I'm able to get it passed.
That makes a lot of sense. Sorry, I was on mute. That makes a lot of sense. That really actually answers that question for my client and also helps me too.
Hmm.
So when someone's, they've screened the tenant, they've done all the right things, they've looked at our your takeaway here is don't automatically go on a year lease, create a better buffer so that way if the inevitable increase comes up, especially with the market, you're not under so much pressure as a landlord, and you're not subject to so much risk because of the non-pay potential, or the way the trend is right now with LTB. When someone's selling their property, what are the things that they need to know when they look at that agreement, purchase and sale? What are the basic forms that they should all have down, the rights they should know of, let's say in a month-to-month tenancy, just so we know, right? Because there's a lot of tribal knowledge out there, and there's a lot of misinformation about, N12, N11, this kind of stuff, right? So could you help just clear that up for our people? Because a lot of our people are either selling an investment property. And so I want to kind of take down that path, if that's okay.
Yeah, so you want to just basically go through what you would do with this, like a basic sale kind of thing, right?
Yeah, basic sale, let's say they went on a month, they're now on a month to month, because we know if they're on a lease, maybe they're on a lease, what's that scenario? If they're month to month, what do we do? How do we look at that APS? How do we, do we get paralegal advice with any offer? There's so many nuances. I know we're not able to cover everything, but maybe just some golden nuggets would be really awesome if you can.
Yeah, sure. So, okay, with an N12, which is it's going to be owner move-in or sale. Okay. Now the sale itself, you first need to have an offer to actually, do the N12, which is like the chicken and the egg kind of thing. Because if you've got a difficult tenant there, you actually have to have it shown, and you have to, they have to let you in, etc. All these things, and at the same time, try to do the N12, which is not possible because you can't get an offer, right? So it's really difficult because for some, and usually what happens is when I get called, it's from a realtor, and the realtor's stuck in this position where they can't do showings. And I know you've been inside the same issue before because I've seen it, but it's hard. It's very difficult to get the offer. So the N12 process is when you have an offer, you serve the N12, and you need to give 1 month's worth of rent via certified check. Okay, I'll be very clear. I did not say offset the rent. I didn't say, don't pay rent for 1 month. That you cannot do that. You cannot e-transfer. Give a certified check or bank draft to the tenant. That's what you need to do, right? So that's your first thing. Your second thing is you need to sign a declaration from the buyer. Now, declarations used to be great, and then they stopped being great because now people start questioning the buyer's intent. So now people are doing affidavits a lot more because it has more grounds. It's a little bit harder to defeat. Okay. So we do affidavits now, explain the extent, and that's generally what the paralegal would do. I would not recommend anyone do an affidavit without having a paralegal or a lawyer. Just don't do it.
Okay.
And that should be done as well. And at the same time, all the while, that deal can't close. As soon as it closes, like, you can, in theory, transfer that file to the new purchaser. But there's been horror stories of adjudicators not allowing that to happen. Or you go up against TDC, which is Tenant Duty Council, and they're able to defeat it as well. So I know a lot of paralegals, who are going to listen to this or see this, they're going to say, yeah, you can transfer over to the file. Yeah, most of the time you can. If it's one representative on their own without someone on the other side, it works well, right? But sometimes, and this happens a lot, the landlord tenant board is looking right and it goes left completely. right? So the case law sort of gets thrown out the window, and you're now in a position of telling your client, yeah, this application is dead because you closed on the property and you just waited 12 months. And you got to restart from the beginning.
So when you say the the transfer, so
Mm-hmm.
someone they have their offer, their property for sale, they have to get an offer to have the N12 in place.
Yep.
The N12 is so someone's saying they're declaring they're signing an affidavit, should be with paralegal advice that they're going to live there or their family's going to live there or whatever, personal use.
Yep. Yep.
And now the process is they do the N12 with a paralegal. It has to get filed with the board.
Mm-hmm.
Does it have to get filed with the board? And then there's a 60-day closing. Let's say they're on a month to month. But what's that disconnect there? I want to make sure I understand from your perspective what are the missing pieces and what could go wrong, because N12 doesn't mean like they have to file it. And what's that
Mm-hmm.
timeline look like for that seller too, like when it comes to,
Yeah. Like, let me.
because like I've seen this like, happen, so it's good to know, right?
Yeah. It's funny because a lot of clients will um, not know what's happening with their own property when they're selling it, and it's really of an issue because essentially speaking, like let me just explain to you this. This is one of the issues that I've dealt with before. Let me just share you my screen real quick so people that are listening on Zoom can actually see this.
Yeah, for
Uh,
sure.
can you see my
Yeah, I can
screen?
see it perfectly. Yep.
Okay, so this is from CHCH. This is a matter that I'm aware of. This home buyer purchased the property, and effectively speaking, they have not been able to move in. So they sold their house and they are living in a trailer outside of the house because the deal can't close, right? So the deal can't close. There's now the buyer is now sitting outside of the property, and the tenant hasn't paid rent for multiple months, and uh, everyone's just waiting. That's it. You're at a standstill, right? The deal will continually be extended until such time this property is vacant, so the buyer can move in.
So the
The
tenant's the
buyer,
weakest link and it still relies on the tenant.
yeah,
Wow.
you basically have a third party to your own contract that you can't do anything about. And this person
Wow.
can do whatever they wish and completely blow a hole into the sale process. And like in this issue, this was a unique one because the reason why it got so much media attention was because the tenant was the bad guy, right? But there's a lot of good tenants that get stuck in this position, right? They have nowhere to go because they can't get accepted anymore. Their rent is low, and they just can't afford anywhere else. And then the buyer, you think on their end, they sold the property and they legitimately just want to move in. They're just a random person that are good people and they just want to move into a house.
Mhm.
And the seller is just someone trying to sell their property and they're in their 80s and they want to retire. They bought this house
Mhm.
years ago
Mhm.
for their retirement, and this is what they're cashing in. They're cashing in their retirement. So everyone could be great, and because the process takes so long, it falls apart really quick, right? So
Wow.
that's a very practical thing of if you're not dealing with a paralegal, you're not dealing with a lawyer, you can get yourself in this position and then lose. But even if you have a paralegal and you have representation, you are still stuck in this area.
So
Like,
what, wow. So like, I mean, with your firm, then what do you do with that process? Like, how do you mitigate that issue from happening? Like, do you file the N12? Do you kind of instruct on the timeline, proper timeline? Do you instruct the seller to accept an offer with a certain closing to make sure that it's going to file accordingly? Like, what's that look like? Just to make sure that, we're getting
yeah,
too
I
detailed,
get a
but
lot of heat for this, but because I'm very unsympathetic to a lot of people's issues, simply because I will likely most of the time I will force the client to file something really quickly, as fast as possible, because I know what will happen. Sympathy with a landlord can kill them.
yes,
It can make them go
yes.
bankrupt. Like, unfortunately, because of the time frame, as a practitioner, I have had to be very, very blunt to tenants, and then my client as well, saying, "Well, maybe we can do this, and we can work." It's like you don't have the, like, you think you have the ability to do
Mhm.
this, you can't. Like, in reality,
Yeah.
you're gonna go bankrupt, right? So I have to tell them, if your tenant is not paying you at least, by the second day, you're serving an N4 because you
Yeah.
cannot afford for this, right?
I,
And
you know
it's
what?
the
That reminds me of, like, I remember hearing one gentleman or an investor said, property management, one of the biggest reasons even to hire them is that they can serve the N4 quicker. They can like start that process quickly.
Yeah.
And once you give a little bit of give, then it becomes this more gray area and the tenants can take advantage. Like I remember even hearing a story where, you know, the tenants were like, well, we were supposed to move out. We signed an N9, but you know what? Can you give us an extra couple days? And the property manager said, no, don't do that because you're going to create a gray area. And so I like what you're saying there. It definitely makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. People will try, like solo landlords, like I love them to death, but damn, like they are so sympathetic. Like they
No,
have a relationship with their tenant. Why? Why do you have a relationship with your tenant? Makes no sense to me. Like they'll give gifts to their tenant. It's like your tenant shouldn't know you. They should know your name and that's it, and where to send the paperwork and where to send the check. Like that's it.
right.
Like you should not have a relationship with your tenant. They shouldn't like you and they
Mhm.
shouldn't hate you. You should be in the
Yeah.
middle of professionalism, right?
Yeah.
If you kept going to the bank and you see the same teller every single time and you do that weird idle chit chat at the front of the teller, like that's what you are. That's how you should be. They should respect you. You should respect them. You're
Yeah.
both adults. That's how you should do it. But you
Yeah.
should not be their friend,
Well,
right?
it's almost like if a realtor was, all of a sudden now dropping off their kids all the time, nothing against it, but all of a sudden now, giving them loans and it just mixing up that weird energy. It's not a good vibe for for
Yeah,
a
right.
landlord and
And
for an investor as well.
what happens? They're your
It does
friend. They start,
happen. Yeah.
yeah, they start asking you for stuff, right? They start asking for leniency, and now you have a relationship. Now you're gonna be more inclined to do it. I'm not faulting you for having like one of my clients is a doctor. How are you gonna tell a doctor to have no empathy? How are you gonna do that? It's impossible, right? What I scolded him with was you have a relationship with them. Your bedside manner doesn't translate into being a landlord. That's why a lot of landlords get a lot of bad flack. It's because they're very cold. It's because they have this shield up, and you have to stay on the other side of it. Because as soon as you start offering sympathy and you start offering for mediation, all these other things, mediation is controlled. Once you file your application, you want to do a payment plan and then provide it that way. 100% on board. I completely agree with it. If you want to provide a clear direction through a contract, clear directions to the board about how someone can meet up their rent payments that are late, etc., I will never say anything against you. But it's these offhanded phone calls in the middle of the night where somebody's saying, I can't pay rent next month. Can you give me a couple of days? And you say yes, that's my issue because it's going to be the first month, the second month, the third, the fourth, the fifth, and things start to stretch from there, right? And then I always hear the same thing from the landlord, and when they call in there and say this bad problem, like I don't know how this happened. Like I was so nice to them. I gave them so many breaks last year when they didn't pay their rent, and I took care of them. I gave them gifts since like Christmas. I'm like, yeah, but then you told them you were selling the property, and then what happened? They went professional again.
Mhm.
You went from friend, and then you're not here, back where you were from the beginning,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, I
Where
agree
they were
with that.
treating you when you were leasing the property when they first started, they had demands of you. Like, if I
Right.
move in, this needs to be fixed, this needs to be fixed, because they had a business relationship. You took it to front and you kicked it back. And then now you're wondering where, like, the act as if it fell from space, but you should know better than to do that, right? So it's that's the issue where you consistently see people be very, let's say, comfortable with their tenants. And I'm not saying to have a lack of a better term, like a garbage attitude, and to think that you're above another human being. No, that's not the appropriate way of doing it. It's even sensitive when I'm dealing with difficult tenants. It's like mental health, with drugs, etc. It's not something you should be doing, but it won't serve you well. But what you should be doing is not have a relationship. You are a professional. You bought this house to have a business. Be
Yeah.
it in business,
And
right?
especially a lot of your clients are investors that have multiple units or they're looking to grow their portfolio or whatever. It's not scalable to have like, and that whole adage of sympathy is like you're jumping off the boat with them
Yeah,
versus maybe you're understanding, empathizing and giving them a solution, following a process and being
mhm.
reasonable, like you said, rather than just completely jumping off the boat with them. That's not going to solve any problems.
Yeah, it won't. It'll put you in a significant problem, right? So, in listen, if the hearings were 2 months, go with it. 100%. I would change my
Right.
mind.
Use some
Yeah,
human element.
oh
Yeah.
yeah, I do the side deal, do whatever. Yeah, that's okay. But the reason why I revert to have it on paper, have it in contract, have it on the landlord tenant board forms, don't write it on a napkin, like all these things is because I have to acknowledge an expensive bloody asset. It's expensive.
It
It's a
is.
seven
It
hundred
is.
thousand to in the average property here in Hamilton is what 758 something like that. So
Yeah.
and you're gonna hand the keys off to someone you don't know. I was at a real estate event at Haggerty's, which I think you know her, Sarah Larrabee's event.
Yep.
Yeah, and I was there, and I was telling this investor who was dealing with an issue, and I just told him, like, look at these cars. These are great cars. These are the exact cars they would transfer off the same asset as your property. It's like there's a $700,000 McLaren. There's an $800,000 Mercedes. There's a $500,000 Formula One car sitting right like 2 feet from us, and they have the entire area cordoned off. You can't even go near the car. They're primed, polished, taken care of, charged, trickle charged, etc. You can't even go near those cars. And yet you're gonna not screen your tenant and hand the keys over to somebody? You think I could walk up and just walk into one of those cars right now before being beaten senseless by security?
No.
Makes no sense. They're the same asset, same type of same. You still have mortgages on those cars. They're mortgages on wheels sometimes.
Hmm.
So what are you doing? But people will do that because they're just looking at cost effectiveness, and it makes no sense. Like if that car got stolen, it'd be the same issue as a professional tenant. That's effectively what they've done. They've taken the asset away from you for a significant period of time,
So you're
right?
seeing
So
that the biggest mistake then has been obviously that screening portion, understanding the terms of the agreement, making sure they don't, and then making sure that there's no over sympathizing and not following a process, and then muddying the relationship with their tenant. So now it creates these weird expectations, and now there's more likely for them to sway into that kind of professional mode,
yeah.
if you will. That makes total sense. So I don't know if you deal with outside of Ontario, but what are the differences you're seeing with Alberta and other provinces that are making it easier? I know Kelly Andrade had someone regarding BC. What's easier there? I mean, not to get too much detail, but you said that the hearings are taking so long here. What are you seeing out there?
So okay, so my scope of practice is only Ontario,
Makes
but I
sense.
do have personal knowledge of this because so it's not legal advice, but I have assets out there, and I work with other investors who do have assets out there, so I do know quite a bit about it. But there's two places in Canada and America that have similar laws like Ontario. Okay, so Ontario itself and California. Those two places have the worst type of wait time for evictions. It takes like a year in California. It's a year here in San Ontario. Everywhere else, it's like 30 days. Alberta, 30, 40 days. And then that's time from non-payment to eviction. Okay. There is an appeal process. Tenant still has rights, right? But Alberta is completely different, right? New Brunswick, PEI, Manitoba, Quebec, etc. All of them have a significantly faster, which from which jurisdiction you're in, it's either going to be 30 to 40 days to like 2 months, 3 months.
So logically, just asking this curiosity, because you're the expert here, why is it so important that why is it different in those provinces? Because it seems like it's causing more pressure on the housing system. It's not working. Other provinces are doing it at a different level and more efficiently. What's the reason we're stuck here and we're not making progress and other provinces seem to be? What do you think about that?
So that's a multi-step answer because it's not one thing. For like when I started practicing, the landlord tempo was already an issue, right? It would take 6 months to get no, it was actually like 4 or 5 months when I first started. And then COVID hit and then everything fell apart. So it can get very bad very quickly. And that's what happened with the landlord and tenant board. Now, soon afterwards, I'm gonna come with you, that's fine. Okay. Sorry, I just have a bit of an
It's all
interruption.
good. We can edit anything.
It's an emergency. He wouldn't have come in afterwards. And I was like, he's
No,
looking
it's
at
all
it.
good. Well, we can edit soon. It's all good.
He's like, oh, he's like, it's not good. We
Yeah, I
gotta.
know. We gotta go soon. It's all good.
Yeah. So if the landlord and tenant board originally was very quick, then it wasn't during COVID. Every other place inside Ontario is faster. Well, it was faster because the jurisdictions were compartmentalized, or how do you say it? But they were cut up. There was Southern District, Hamilton District, Toronto District, different courthouses with different things. Toronto was the worst because it was the most largest. But then they put it all together. Then interest rates climb. Then there wasn't enough building. Then we had a shortage of housing. Then things got worse and worse and worse and worse, right? And it wasn't enough, right? So those things is what ultimately led it to become that. And then now we're in a position where we are right now.
Okay. No, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, I know you're always advocating for change, and Kayla's advocating for change and looking at what's not working and looking at who's in, parliament and all that stuff, political factors that are affecting this. And, you know, especially like you said too, like not painting landlords with one brush, like actually understanding that we're attempting to create more housing, better housing for people as investors, but also there to make money and making sure that works for everybody. So is there anything that you see often that you'd like to address for real estate investors, landlords, that you see that you think that they should be aware of, and anything else you'd like to add as well? Because I know we're going to have you on again and again because there's a
Yeah.
lot of good information here. So
Be professional, but don't be sympathetic. Well, be professional, right? Don't be too sympathetic. Be professional. And you're not their friend. You're not their friend. You're a business professional. Be a business professional. My staff are not the friends of my clients. They're professionals. Like that is entirely something I can ask of my staff. I would not ask them to be going out for drinks with my clients.
yeah.
That's not something that's appropriate. That's not appropriate for you. You're not sending them gifts on Christmas. You're not giving them bonuses every year. You're not a realtor. You're a business professional. Do it that way, and you'll be a lot better. It'll serve you better, and that's what the number one thing. We spent about a half hour just regards to just sympathy itself with landlords. Be very
Mhm.
careful with that.
Yeah, you got to be careful. And people mistaken that cold heartedness for decisiveness.
Yeah,
And it's not that you don't have a heart, it's that you know how to make a decision, you follow a process, and you're not deviating from it. And that's okay. And that's still a good person. So I think
you
that
can
that's a
cut someone a break. Just do it correctly.
misinterpretation.
Yeah,
Exactly.
if you want to cut someone a break, that's fine. Absolutely. I will never fault someone for helping
Yeah.
the underprivileged, the poor, the downtrodden. There's a lot of people that get taken advantage of, right? They need to be helped. That you want to stop homelessness, and a lot of landlords help with those issues, right? They can offer affordable units. They can. It's a lot of good people inside our industry. Just
Mhm.
do it correctly. Don't do it the other way. That's all.
Awesome. So where can people reach you? So if anybody is listening to this and they're looking for advice, maybe you're selling an underperforming property, you want to figure out if this makes sense for you, you want to
Yeah.
figure out what to look for in the agreement, purchase and sale, where can people reach you? And obviously we'll make sure that they're taken good care of because you guys are great. So share that.
Yeah, you can reach me at 289-339-1311, which is our office line, or you can reach us at caveatllp.com. We're on Facebook, Caveat LLP. We're on Instagram. I think we have a TikTok somewhere, but we're all over the place. If you want to look for myself, and my name is Andrew Choubeta again. My colleague Glenn Gosling is here, and Angela Smith as well. So if you ever need anything, give us a call.
Thanks so much, Andrew. Really appreciate your time and have fun putting out some fires.
Absolutely. All right,
All right.
guys.
Take care of
Thanks
yourself,
for the
buddy.
time.
You too.
See you
Thanks
later.
again. Bye, bud.
Bye bye.